All right, MYB, we're here, episode number 229 of the Minding Your Business podcast. Entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. I'm your host, Champ Ron. We're recording this on December the 7th, 2020. We're in our last days. When they say we're in the last days, we're not talking biblically. Maybe we are, but we're definitely talking the last days of 2020. For some of you, you're shouting glory, glory, hallelujah. For some of you, maybe it's a little bit different thing, but all in all, 2020 has definitely challenged us in many different ways. But we definitely continue to have opportunities each day, and I hope that you seize those. Don't rush to get through the year so quick, because we still have days remaining in 2020, and those last days create tremendous, tremendous opportunity. So don't miss that with yourself, with your customers, and your prospects. Subscribe to the podcast, 5-star, 5-star, helps us continue to grow the MYB community. And you can always catch us at champronbrooks.com. That's champronbrooks.com. And of course, we're brought to you by the Binge Podcast Network. Shout out to the entire lineup at the Binge Podcast Network, including my great colleague and friend, Dominic Lawson, with the Startup Life podcast. Make sure that you guys check that out. All right. I am excited about today's guest. You know, MYB, how we are about fellow podcasters. You know, we love to support fellow podcasters, fellow creators, fellow authors. All right. What we want to do is, and you're going to hear me say this, so go ahead and get ready, right? Because I'm going to get on your nerves today. We're going to make sure we always like to support by being active, right? We don't want to just talk about it. So when we bring someone on and they have, poured into creative platforms to help us all, we want to make sure we support that, right? We can't whine about when we don't get content and then don't support the content when it's there, right? That's not what we do. We let other podcast communities do that, right? We're action takers, right? And so that's what we want to do today. And so we want to support, this young man with his podcast. We want to support him in his business. And then we want to support his book. And you're going to get more information on that. Steve Brown is our guest today. He is author of, and it's got a tremendous title that I love, The Golden Toilet. Stop flushing your marketing budget into your website and build a system that grows your business. He's the author of that. Tremendous. ROI. He's a founder of ROI Online, which we're going to really get into as well. You can go to roionline.com. It's in the show notes. Make sure that you do that. And also, he's the host of the ROI Online podcast, which is, they have tremendous fun, but it's a little different than your normal kind of marketing show. You get some really good insight, really kind of personable. In terms of how it's presented, it's not, someone talking to you from 40,000 feet. Mm-hmm. It's not, a bunch of guys talking from the 50th floor who are, concerned about their stock portfolio. It's everyday guys and girls talking, kind of real practical information that you can implement immediately. And that's what we love in the podcast community. So with all of that, Steve Brown, again, is our guest. And Steve, thank you so much for joining us here on the Minding Your Business podcast.
Champ Ron, I'm extremely proud to be here today. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're excited to have you on, my man. And, this is a tremendous honor to be speaking with you. And so let's dive right in if we can. For those that aren't familiar with you personally, Steve, tell us about your background and your journey to get to where you are today. I have to imagine that you probably didn't have the silver spoon, and you probably aren't knighted by the Queen of England, and
No, I probably would have been one of them that they put on the assassination list, right? Yeah. Right. So, no, I have hustled all my life. I grew up in a little town in Texas called Amarillo.
Okay.
And, I was just your typical kid. We didn't sit around, the breakfast table every day talking about what college we were going to go to. My family, they just had to figure stuff out. And,
absolutely.
My dad, he was always working late so that we could go to a school where we had more opportunities. Sure. And so, by example, he showed us that working hard and just showing up and being faithful was like the way to be successful. And he showed us by his actions. So, I didn't. I went to college, junior college, just right out of high school, but I paid for it, and then I dropped out, and I went about things on my, my own way that I could. I'm just going to be successful without college. Long
Sure.
story short, I did go back and I did get my degree as a non-traditional student, but I would end up in a sales position for a lot of companies.
Hmm.
And I just helped them grow their market. And in many ways, a sales position is like being an entrepreneur. If you look at it, you're responsible for finding your leads, for managing the onboarding. You eat what you kill. And
Yes.
and that's what I loved about it. And I didn't really realize that I was entrepreneurial until later. I was good at it. I'd always get put into that position. And so started to notice that, back in the day, you had to do these cold calling,
Yeah.
cold calls, cold calls, cold calls. That's how you went out and found business.
Sure.
But the internet was starting to be a solution that people would expect. And I would go over and update the website. I just take it on my initiative and go update the company's website because I noticed that when people reached out from the website, you might close 1 out of 3 of those.
Sure.
But when you're cold calling, you might close 1 out of 10 cold calls. And so
Yeah.
being, really sharp, I caught on after a year or so. I'm being facetious, but I caught on that, hey,
Right.
this internet thing has got some legs.
Right.
Long story short, I started working for a web design firm that I went to for these couple of firms that I went and updated their website. I started working for that web design firm and I saw the other side of the conversation.
Yeah.
I saw folks that were in my shoes coming in, being vulnerable, not knowing what to ask for, having an expectation of a website, but not knowing what it should be.
Yes.
And I saw how those projects started to crash. And I was thinking, they should run this business a better way. And I got a little convicted that I shouldn't be sitting around complaining about how they were running the business. If I was so smart, I should step out and do my own.
Yes.
But that's scary.
Of course it is.
But I did. Eventually, I did it. And so I started ROI Online. And I did it to support the folks that I believe the invisible heroes of our time, Champron, are the entrepreneurs.
Of course.
They're the business owners. You think about it. They risk everything, their family's future on no guarantee
Right.
to start a business. And what do they end up doing? They employ a significant portion of the workforce and they design products and services that improve our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And those are my heroes. And that's why I started ROI Online.
Yeah. Excellent. And you make a tremendous point that I've made as well, Steve. So we're united in that piece of there's something strange about wanting to be a business owner and entrepreneur, right? It kind of goes against conventional wisdom. It's actually kind of dumb if you think about it. It's actually kind of a dumb thing. You're like you say, you're taking, by definition, you're risking all those things personally and professionally to solve problems for mostly other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
The easiest thing is the workforce, right? Because, and that's why, obviously so many people are involved in it. And obviously it's tremendous to making the whole ecosystem work, but that's much more sane is to go and work for, a business owner, right? Have, not say, depending on your state, some states, like here in Tennessee, we have a right to work state. So it's not guaranteed, there's not very few unions and things like that, Steve, but, a fairly consistent pay, right? Every once a month, every other week, whatever it is. So that makes a lot more sense than what we're doing. You know what? I left a banking career where I was making, well into the 6-figure money, to do what I'm doing today. And I work, I was telling somebody this just the other day, I work way more than I did just in terms of, getting things uprooted and moving. I work way more than I did in my banking career.
Yeah.
Ever. And so it's just interesting, you say, well, why would I? Some days I look at, why am I doing that? It'd be easy for me to go make mid 100s, $1,000 career, base salary, in my industry, and not have to deal with all the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But kind of like you described, there's an itch that I have, and I want to hear some more of this from you. That I enjoy, because like you, in banking, I was in these sales roles, right? Typically, I'm leading sales teams, or I'm a contributor myself, and so like you, I always was doing or in kind of this entrepreneur role, but now taking it on full steam, like I have here these last 2.5 years full time, has been just tremendous. But I had that itch to solve problems, right? Did you kind of have that, where you kind of developed this beyond just the monetization of it, right? I imagine you probably had this natural, and you probably discovered this, Steve, this natural desire to see how the puzzle pieces connect, right? And how many problems could you solve for somebody else, right? And then you get paid for the more problems you solve. Obviously, the more you get paid. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I had this desire to be in control. Okay. But I think you have to pay your dues for a while. And so when I say I wanted to be in control, that's why I gravitated to sales roles, because I would have more control about the accounts I would approach or bring on, and I would get to be creative. But over time, I realized that you're still somewhat subjected to the direction of the overall company and the decisions that the leadership is making for that company. And sometimes I would find that frustrating.
Yeah.
And I would find myself realizing I'm going to have to make a change that I wasn't in control of. I saw that the direction that the company was going, or maybe they were struggling, or maybe there was just something there that wasn't. I still had to pivot and start over.
Yeah.
Several times. And one day it just hit me that, Steve, these are good that you're working for these folks, but now it's like it's starting to reveal itself that if you don't want to experience the results of other people's decisions, you're going to have to step up and make your own decisions and become your own boss. And there's no guarantee when you start your business either, but I felt, at least at that point in my life, I could take the experience that I had and have a little more confidence that I could do it.
Sure.
I could figure it out, just like I had exhibited in my previous sales roles. I could figure it out, but it's hard. And there's a lot of things I learned. But you know what I learned, Champ Ron?
What's that?
I learned that I was good at other things that I didn't know I was good at. When you were in your role at your banking thing, you had you had your box where you were supposed to be an expert. But when you start a business, you got to be an expert at a lot of things.
True.
Right?
True.
And you got to be good enough at the rest.
Yes.
And I started to figure out I was natural at a handful of things I didn't know I was, because I never got to experience that before.
Yeah.
And that was fulfilling, even though it was that anxiety of a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You come around a turn, you go, oh my gosh, your stomach comes up in your throat, and that happens as an entrepreneur.
Right. It definitely does. It's very true. Yep. Very true.
You have to get comfortable not being in control.
Yes.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I say it's an interesting thing, because like you say, there's that dichotomy, right, Steve, that you just described, which is you want to be in control, and you're used to having control, even albeit the box is created for you, right? Mm-hmm. So all the rules of engagement are created for you by someone or someone's above you. But then when you go out kind of on your own, so to speak, where now you're the one that creates the boundary lines. You're the player, you're the coach, you're the referee, you're the general manager. I mean, you're everything within. If you're using the sports analogy, you're
Yeah.
kind of everything. At least to start,
Right.
right? And so that's interesting because you give up essentially all your control, right, that you normally would have or that's provided for you,
Right.
to go out on your own. And so that's it's just interesting. And so, for you in your early days in business, Steve, when you transition from kind of that corporate world to kind of your early days in business,
Mm-hmm.
on your own, talk us through and walk us and unpack those early days. How was it dealing with not having that control and not having that consistent paycheck every other week or every 2 weeks or once a month, or not having the sales commissions and things like that. Those things kind of stop almost pretty much immediately, and then now you've got to go create it. Did you feel like a level of pressure that maybe helped propel you? Did you have days where you panicked and kind of said, oh my God, did I make the right decision? I mean, God, today would have been payday.
Serious.
Right. How
Oh,
was that for you?
so first of all, there was this. I knew I was going to go without pay for an indefinite period. I knew that the person that I brought on board right away,
Mm-hmm.
that my number one priority was to make that payroll for that person
Yes.
in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So to grab business and invoice that business, but to make sure that whatever expenses I had needed to be covered. And number one was that employee's payroll. The being natural with sales, I had a certain confidence that I could get the business. I needed to figure out how to keep the business, start invoicing, collections, starting to be a business person rather than a salesperson. As a salesperson, you
Yeah.
just bring the account in and let the owners clean up the mess that you just started, but it was the opposite, right?
Right.
Now I had to deliver the business, invoice. I had to start doing those things. I was able to procure good accounts pretty quick. And so that took a little pressure off, and I was able to pay myself after several months, which felt good, you
Yeah.
know, but it was like, it wasn't about what I was going to be paid. It was more about what I was building.
Yes.
When you work for someone else, you're following their systems and their processes, whether you like it or not. Okay.
Yeah.
And you sit there and go, well, I would do this different. Well, guess what? You have to start building out systems and processes that
Correct.
people that you're hiring may or may not like.
Yes.
Guess what? You have to enforce those now. You have to get buy-in. You have to deliver justification and reasoning behind those things. And that's where the focus started to change. Was if this was going to be a growing concern, I had to get my act together as a business person.
Sure. Sure.
That's a different game.
Yeah, it is.
While you sell, while you hire, while you manage, while you handle fires, you walk in the morning, you're going to handle something that's on your mind since yesterday. I'm going to get
Yes.
that handle more. You walk in and you get a pie in the face on something new you
Right.
didn't expect. You got to handle that too.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Yep, you're exactly right. I go back in my last role before doing what I'm doing now, Steve. I had a fairly sizable operation. I was in the C-suite, of a financial institution where, I was managing 2/3 of this organization's employee count, that fell into the retail banking world. And that kind of experience then propelled me to what I'm doing today, because what you just described was my day to day. There was always, so I had yesterday's issues that for the ones that bled over to the next day. And then the excitement of that was, not knowing what today was going to bring. And that could be good, bad, or indifferent. Right. But there was no day where I just twiddled my thumbs and there was, oh, let me figure out what I can do. Like every day had um, some other opportunity. And when you're dealing with people, the human being, which is the biggest wild card on the planet,
Mhm.
um, yeah, it was intriguing to deal with the different personalities, the different expectations. And you're exactly right. Almost no matter what was done, there was always somebody that didn't like it or
Mhm.
didn't agree with it and that sort of thing. And you had to enforce that within the confines of that you enforce that. You're right. Now in building kind of systems and processes, like you say, I'm the one that's doing the complete enforcing, not because I'm paid to enforce it, but because I set it up from a visionary standpoint. So,
Mhm.
I had to really quickly develop my visionary mindset, where I had reached at the highest. I was in heavy of kind of strategy, not so much in tactical, but I was in more of the strategy piece with a little bit of visionary. Once you get to the C suite and you're kind of over a division. But now I have to have that skill set plus a whole lot of visionary
Yeah.
skill set, where I can't, as I build systems, I'm not playing as much in the weeds of, how to fill out this contract or how to enter something into a system, right? All the data calculations and all of that. I'm not involved in that as much as I was on the ascension of my career. And
Mhm.
you probably were the same way too. At the entry level, you're a lot of data entry. You're very transactional,
Right.
right? And then as you grow along into your career, you get kind of away. So for guys like you and I, having to explain what line 19 does and how that translations to the report is probably we're not the best to explain that,
Mm-mm.
but we understand the data that goes into the report and then how to make decisions from that,
Yeah.
right? And then how do you plan as much as you can for the future, and weighing the pros and cons and cost benefit analysis and all those different things that you described. It's just interesting. I enjoyed this conversation with you because I think this helps people that are listening to kind of frame that progression that it takes when you go from where you may be today on your job, working for a large company, small company, whatever it is, Steve, to when you do strike out and go on your own. You mentioned, that indefinite time of not knowing when to get paid.
Yeah.
um, talk about that kind of briefly.
Yeah.
That's a tough feeling because here we deal in the reality, right? And I've listened to you guys' podcast, so I know this is kind of up your alley. At the end of the day, for folks listening, here's the reality: the mortgage company calls, right? They don't care whether you want to start your dream or not.
Mm-mm.
The utility company calls, right? The car folks, the student loan people, all these folks, right? That all they want is money, right? Um, and so they don't understand you going to take on your dream and all the things that we talked about. Those aren't things that you can, when you pick up the phone for your mortgage folks and you say, well, you know what, I'll pay you once I get the business kind of going. If you
Mm-mm.
guys can just hold on and believe in my dream, yeah,
Mm-mm.
I promise you're going to get paid. They don't go for that, right?
No, they don't.
They say, hey, you're due on the first. Right. So talk
Yeah.
about that. Talk about that uncomfortableness, Steve, and how, more so, how you managed through that. How did you continue to focus on kind of things that were mission critical and not get so burdened down with if you had this with the bill folks calling and sending you letters and doing all that.
In my book, I have a little part I talk about this, but you remember that show Survivor Man?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Great show where they just drop this guy off with pocket knife and he's got the clothes he's on his back or whatever, and the show's about what he does for the week to survive, but at the end of the week he just needs to make it to a point where the helicopter is going to land. He's going to get on that helicopter and then go off, right?
Right.
So he just drop him off. It may be cold. He needs to find some water and some shelter at the worst. If he can drink a little water during the week and just not freeze, then he doesn't have to eat. He just gets to the point at the end of the week to catch a helicopter. Well, so that's when you first step out,
Mm-hmm.
That's what every week is basically your mindset is on. I just need to kill something so I can eat and make it through the week.
Right. There you
Okay?
go.
But think about what you would do if they dropped him off. His name was Les, I think. It doesn't matter. They
Yeah.
drop Les off, and then they tell him as they're giving the gas and starting to take off, we're not going to pick you up in a week. We're going to pick you up in a year.
Yeah.
Oh, oh my gosh. He would approach that coming week way differently, wouldn't he?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, he would.
He'd get real serious. First of all, he's going to go, oh, well, I need not only water, I need to find a place where there's a food source and a really good shelter source. I'm going to have to grow some food. I'm going to have to do some other things. But he's still got to eat and drink some water to make it through the week.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what it felt like. I needed to kill something, but I didn't just need to eat and sleep and not worry about it. I needed to start building up my plan and my strategy more long term.
Yes.
Well, what does that mean? It means that I got to, the people that would come to us, hey, can you do a backflip? And then can you roll over? And then can you play dead? And you're like, you bet. It's only $50.
Right.
Okay. And whatever they'd ask, we'd do. But at some point you have to go, no, we don't want to do that because that's not profitable. I don't need the money that bad. We will do, we'll do this and this and the conversation started to change about what's best for them and what our best use of our time was, instead of like, hey, we'll do anything for an invoice, right?
Right.
So over time, that impacted who I would hire, what service that we started to provide, what training and thinking and positioning we needed to do, what clients we would take and wouldn't take. How do I go and meet those folks? You start to get you think different.
Yeah.
You still need to pay those bills, but there's like this courage step you got to take.
Yeah.
That's an additional risk of just
Yes.
starting a business. Now you're saying no to some checks.
Yes. And then and in doing all that, Steve, and then I want to get to, the book, and I want to get to ROI Online specifically. But in doing that, how do you manage that when you've got other people relying on you, right?
Mhm.
So, and again, I don't want to say this to be, derogatory or anything, but it's one thing if it's just you, right? You're kind of a, single guy, you're a single girl.
Mhm.
No one else is really relying. So, if you eat sardines and live out of the car, nobody really knows it but you. Nobody's really impacted but you. But, talk about that from the standpoint when you have, significant other. Maybe you even have children. Maybe you
Mhm.
have parents that are relying on you that are more senior, and you make that decision. So now you've got this extra pressure of other living people or things, pets, whatever, that are relying on your ability to produce consistent income. I think a lot of people listening to this, they struggle with wanting to do things because they have this innate fear, Steve, of what the spouse is going to say or do, or how they may view them, or that if it doesn't work out, the spouse is going to run off with the children, and it's going to be this big public brouhaha and all this type of thing. And so there are these innate fears that people have. So talk about that, from that standpoint of what you just were saying in regards to having then the extra pressure of family.
Yeah, that's really real.
Yeah.
And it's even more personal when they don't understand, or their thinking, their perspective is whatever their perspective is, and it doesn't take into consideration all the experience and closeness that you have to what's going on.
Yeah.
And yet you have to get this faith and this calm assertiveness about you that you're going to plow through this regardless of
Yeah.
all the drama flags or smoke or fear that's
Yes.
happening, that if you focus on that, it can get you off the track. And you do have to go, I have a strategy and I see the plan and I'm making these decisions based on my experience in the long term. The long game is what I'm wanting to play instead of the short game.
Sure.
And they don't know all the details. The thing that you have to balance, though, and it messes with your insecurity. Am I making the right long-term decision here? Because you
Sure.
question yourself. Are are their comments legitimate or are they not? Am I being realistic or am I being drama myself?
Yes.
That's where the rubber meets the road as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That you're going to, bottom line, we know it's not going to unfold like you think it's going to unfold.
Right.
Where you have to get comfortable is, I don't care. I'm still going to make it. I have enough of what it takes to figure this out.
Yes.
Just, you gotta, but you need to make sure you're taking care of immediate things, but you're also investing in long-term things. And if you're only focusing on immediate, you're never going to have a direction. You're just going to be pushed around. And that's why I got to take care of immediate little things. But most of my energies and focus and strategy and decisions are based on my long game and my strategy, where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no doubt. Steve Brown's our guest today here on episode number 229 of the Minding Your Business podcast. Um, Steve, so ROI Online, tell us about the company, tell us about the organization. You know, with what you just explained, I think that really sets a nice stage for this. Tell us about what you and your team do to make a difference for business owners as they do exactly what you just did, which
Yeah.
is those that commit to that almost irrational confidence, that irrational tenacity, right?
Mhm.
That irrational, tenacious focus of moving forward in whatever direction they're looking to go from an entrepreneurship or business standpoint. Talk about how your organization is a resource to those folks.
Yeah. So, Chambron, you think about the folks that come to us, and they come in and they're in this situation where they go, okay, I got this business, I've got employees, I've got good customers, I got good service or products, but they look up from the battle and they go, we need to get our act together online, because that's where the future is. And that's what people are expecting of us, to have some sort of legitimate professional online presence that's going to help me grow the business. So they come in and they say, hey, I think I need a new website, and I think I need to do some social media stuff. And I think I need to show up in a search. They're using the best words they know to convey. If I was to have subtitles on that, it's like, Steve, I need to get my act together here, and I'm expecting it to grow the value of my business somehow, and I'm insecure about the best way to go about it, and it's in an
Sure.
area that I'm not comfortable.
Mm,
But that's where the future is, and that's where the brands that I appreciate, they have their act together there.
yeah.
And now, on top of all these other fires that I'm doing, I need to be excellent at this too. I need you, Steve. That's what they were saying. And so ROI Online basically is this. These entrepreneurs struggle with this big, this big dark force they have to go through called online marketing. And so
Yeah.
what they need is a team that'll help them get a map and a flashlight and show them through that forest and help
Mm,
them come out of that dark, scary place with a professional online presence, with a strategic plan, and a realistic expectation of how it's going to help them produce more sales, support the sales process. And
yeah.
and so what we're trying to do is get them to not look at it as a website, but see a system in a process.
Yes.
Okay, this is a legitimate business process now. It used to be, hey, let's hire some ditzy marketing person to help us get a pretty website and do some pictures of our dogs on dog day,
Right.
right? But now it's like, this is a legitimate business process. It can help us get data and insights, support a sales process, support customer service. There's a lot of opportunities now to be to have a competitive advantage over our competitors who are facing these same monsters.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Yeah. One of the things, Steve, when I was looking at and perusing you guys' website, there are two things that really jumped out that I want to ask you and kind of have you speak to. One is at the very top, when you talk about what you do, it said something to the effect that great marketing required more than hard work.
Mhm.
It required a team and a strategy.
Yeah.
Um, And then, something else you talked about, more telling a story with your marketing or kind of storytelling marketing,
Mhm.
which I think really fits as you talk about in today's pandemic, right? As companies have maybe struggled in that regard, or they're just struggling overall to gain traction in, not to say a competitive marketplace, but in a more um, noisy marketplace. Let me use that term.
Yeah.
I don't like to, saturated. What is that? I mean, it's supposed to be there's, 9 billion people on the planet and growing. Um, so it's a noisy marketplace now. Everybody's trying to get everybody's attention. There's limited dollars. There's limited disposable income, right? So everybody's jousting for a piece of that, right? Talk about that. Your company's approach to you know um, you know marketing being more than just working hard for that, but putting your team and, like you say, your systems, your strategy in place. And then one of those being, being able to tell a story
Yeah.
for your company, where your company, you breathe life into the company as a living entity, and not just existing on documentation, right? Or existing on a sign or
Yep.
on a logo, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's our dilemma. In this past year, we've all of a sudden, who would have thought that you could invite people over to your showroom?
Yeah.
You couldn't meet them at the business conference table and shake their hand or meet them for coffee. Who would have ever thought that was in play? But here, the dilemma is this: we still need to figure out how to be relevant and make connections with people who need our products and services. So, in an industrialized world, like you're saying, that's super noisy, everybody's focusing on the technology and they're not focusing on the humans. They're
Yes.
on the other side of things, right? And so, what I love to say is our world has changed, but our brains have remained the same. And so, what does that mean? That means that our brains were designed a long time ago to help us survive. To
Yes.
Okay, and so we're excellent survivors. But if you have a business and you can't shake someone's hand or look them in the eye, you need to figure out a way to connect with those humans in the environment that you need to excel in, and that's a digital environment.
Yes.
So how do we do that? Well, we just have to do this. Don't see consumers with credit cards, basically like just faceless, nameless mannequins with a credit card. See humans on the other side that have families and dreams and things that they want to get done. And if
Yes.
you can design your an online environment to honor that, then you will have a competitive advantage and you will excel. And so, how do we do that? Every day, our brains, we have this old part of the brain called the brainstem.
Mm-hmm.
I call it the bodyguard. Okay. And that part of the brain doesn't process language, yet any decision you make needs approval, a thumbs up or a thumbs down from that bodyguard.
Mm-hmm.
So remember the time that you maybe you went into a store or you went into a situation and you thought, I don't feel comfortable here. I'm going to leave. Your
Yes.
bodyguard was going, something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. Well, that's in play when they're on your website, when they read your emails, when they look at your social media posts. That's still in play.
Yeah.
And the way that you can get the old brain, the bodyguard, to sign off on that is just go figure out a way to communicate. I understand you. You're safe here. Let me show you some things that'll help you solve what it is you're concerned about.
Yeah.
We go online every day looking for solutions to overcome challenges that we're facing. And we go to websites and we leave ugly, confusing, frustrating websites without mercy.
Mm.
And we hang out on websites that we enjoy and that we just, for whatever reason, we like. And that's because that website's honoring the way that your brain desires to receive information. And so in story, we are the heroes in our story. When we watch a movie, we see a hero, the topic of the movie, the book, or whatever.
Right.
Learn that a change is on the way, and then we enjoy watching how they navigate the options that change compelled them to go through. But the big part of the story is their insecurity about how they're going to navigate it.
Mm.
And that's in play when someone's evaluating what you do. There's
Yeah.
some insecurity that they're trying to not to get past. They're trying to get past it.
Sure.
If your marketing can touch on that insecurity and go, look, Champron, you want to have good guests on here?
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you want is one that's going to be boring and not bring value.
Correct.
Okay. So what do? You look for folks that are going to help resolve something because you've worked hard for this podcast.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Without
And
question.
and you like everybody, but you know what? I want someone that's going to help my people, my audience, learn and grow.
Yes.
And that's in the back. You don't say it when you evaluate us, but that's in the background. And that's,
Yeah.
so I just want to make sure that it's clear.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be one of the best guests that you have for your audience.
Sure.
That's what your marketing needs to convey to the people you want to serve, whoever's listening.
Yes.
It's not a podcast maybe, but you need to go, look, I'm going to help you navigate the challenges. Don't worry about me. You're safe here and we're going to take care of you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And to expound on that point, Steve, using me as that example. So for this podcast, you're right. There is that evaluation that is done, as you look at every background, every name, that sort of thing, and you do the due diligence, right? The big thing that I always come away with this podcast is that does the person listening, the individual listening, take something, at least one thing from the dialogue that me and the guests have that they can go that's applicable, right? I didn't build the podcast on theory. I didn't build the podcast on this idea that I'm just simply a host and a tour guide, for the guest. I'm in a unique position in that I have, obviously I'm in business. I've got experiences as well to share, right? That can, again, all goes to the benefit of the end listener, that what can they go apply? So it's not just to feel good. So it's not just to be entertained or to feel good for a moment and then go back into your bubble and say, okay, that was a nice hour. I enjoyed that, but that's now an hour away from me working on what I was working towards, whatever that goal is. I want to be more of that resource that you think of, like Batman with his utility belt, just about any situation he gets into, he conveniently has something in his utility belt that helps him get it out, right? Every time, whether it's a movie, the cartoon, whatever it is. And so I want to be one of those, that not that you have to be in a dire situation, but regardless of your situation, you can go to your utility belt and find ROI Online. You can go into your utility belt and find the Minding Your Business podcast.
Mhm.
And there's something that's been said, or there's a guest that appeals to you, that something was said that helps you, particularly with, because I think most people, the technical piece, like you said, the technology is not you. There's all kind of ways to learn the technology, right? There's YouTube. Everybody's teaching courses on that. The big thing that you said that it really stands out, Steve, is the human connection, right? And that's something that can get lost sometimes in this pursuit of an arms race for who can win the pissing contest with tech.
Yeah.
Right. And you can get caught up into that in all the different arenas, whether you're the consumer, the business owner, wherever you are, is this pissing contest on, okay, can I learn the technology? I can use the technology better and manipulate it better than the next person. But at the end of the day, like you said, there's a human being on the other end who has real life situations. And that's why I asked you about, and we talk about this on the podcast, the real life applicable things. At the end of the day, when people cut off this podcast, they've got mortgages to pay. They've got kids that are doing virtual school. They got kids going to school. They've got parents they're taking care of. They've got their own health that they're concerned about, their own financial situations. So all these real things that people are dealing with, I like to appeal to that.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, anybody can go and read about how to do something, right? So that's why you see on this podcast, you don't see me doing a lot of how to start a restaurant, right? I've never started one. So all I can tell you is what someone else tells me through reading or watching YouTube, but you can do that on your own.
Right.
Yeah. If you want to start a restaurant, I want to help you with the mindset of that.
Yeah.
If you want to dive into being able to tell your story, then I want to have someone like yourself
Mm-hmm.
that comes in that does that every day, right? It's not theory. It's not, a thesis statement that, a college professor writes. Nothing against that, but you do it every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't. And many that are listening may or may not. And so how can they take that along with your story and journey, Steve, and how can they apply that to their life?
Yeah.
Right. All of us are different, but how can we apply those things? And so I learn just as much as my audience does, hopefully, that helps us be, again, just a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
what it's about.
I think the one thing that the folks that are listening, there was a time in my life where I was looking for something to do. I knew I needed to start a business, but I didn't know what. So I looked at a state farm agency. I looked at a disaster restoration. What can I make money at?
Yeah.
Okay. But that was the wrong thing for me to focus on. And what I landed on is, what is my passion?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to help people overcome hurdles, but you still got to pay the bills. But I think one of the things that helps, if you focus on the why, you get excited about something, is really important. And that's your differentiator. It's like, what if you like to take pictures of mothers that just had babies, probably the reason that you got into that is because you recognized something that they needed.
Yes.
Okay. And so there was a why behind that.
Mm-hmm. And
that mother that you serve, whether you said it or not, gets that. And that's why she connected with you. And I think that's what you have to remember, to let that kind of guide it helps you connect with the folks behind that are choosing you. Is like you're connecting because there's a deeper reason why you do what you do, other than I just want to pay the bills.
Right. Yep, exactly. And to go along with that, with what I do, whether it's in community banking space, people think that I've got these different buckets, right? Between the podcast, my real estate investing, Steve, and then my community banking consulting, right? Where I work with community banks in low to moderate income areas. But really, they all interconnect into this one passion of mine, which is connecting people from different walks of life. And it goes back to my childhood, right? In my childhood, I have experiences in contrasting areas, right, of that represent this country, right? Low to moderate income, upbringing with um, exposure to more well-to-do, right? And I understood and saw pretty quickly that neither understands each other, right? And both have their prejudices, they have their stereotypes and their views of the other across the track. So you imagine like these different aisles, like people talk about with Washington, right? And you've got blue and red, and so there are these disparages, right? That people that divide people, right? And so what I like to be then is that uniter, right? That one that shows that even as a Black man sitting here in Memphis, Tennessee, that, and I say this on the show all the time, Steve, I often end this show with, the three areas where we all are united, which is we all want to be a little better for ourselves, our families, and our communities.
Amen.
And so that being a part of who I am, like you said, it's not an approach of how do I make money. I'm doing a webinar, just a quick plug. I'm doing a webinar on Sunday, December the 7th that I've got packed out that I'm going to teach, the banking behind real estate investing, right? And how to get involved. One of the things that they're going to find is half the time I'm not going to talk about all the technical pieces of real estate, right? And I'm not going to sell you. I don't have no upsell coaching deal. What I'm gonna teach is the mind, the beginning of it is the mindset around what you just said, which is the pursuit of money is kind of like, and I've said this on other podcasts, it reminds me of the Roadrunner and Coyote cartoons, right? The beginning of every one of them starts with the coyote chasing the bird. So already there's action, right? And for cartoons from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, this was great because it comes right on with immediate action, right? He's chasing the bird again. Right. When he gets close to him, he turns his head while still running forward, the Roadrunner, full speed. He turns his head, sticks his tongue out at him, and takes off. Boom. So fast that the road comes up off the ground. The coyote stops and says, "Oh, beep." And his eyes fall out of his head or his mouth drops to the ground because he's like, for the 100th time, he realizes now that this thing's fast as hell. Right. So now he goes, the whole cartoon is him going through these strategies that always fail of him trying to catch this bird.
Yeah.
Right. And he doesn't even explain what he's going to do when he just wants to eat him. One bird in the middle of the desert. Right. And he's ordering all this stuff from Acme and, it was Amazon, I guess, at the time. And, he's never swiping the credit card. He doesn't, how he pays for this stuff, you don't know. Right. But he gets it. Right. And so that's what I equate to as an analogy for the pursuit of money is that you become the coyote chasing the Roadrunner. Yeah. He's always going to outrun you. Every strategy that you use, you stick birdseed under a boulder, right? You try to stick dynamite under something and get him to come. Yeah. Whatever you're doing to attract the money, it rarely is going to work. Your focus is, like you said, what is your passion, right? And do you fulfill your passion? So that example you gave of someone taking photos of a mother, with a newborn, that's their desire to capture that moment. And there's something within that individual who does that business that has a passion for capturing precious moments.
Yeah.
I
love that. That's beautiful. I love that Roadrunner story.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the analogy I use all the time is, and I've been there, right? Like you said, I've gotten into things with that pursuit of money. I'm chasing Roadrunners, right? But what you find out pretty quick is you're not as fast as that Roadrunner, as that bird.
Yeah,
he takes off on you, right? And you can spend your whole career chasing him, right? And then you look as silly as he looks in those Roadrunner cartoons, where 50 years later, everyone starts off with him chasing the bird, the same bird.
Yeah.
Nothing. He's not chasing it. There's nothing new. You don't know if he's eating in between episodes. He's just still chasing that bird. And that's where it goes back to what you said, Steve, about even with family. That's why family sometimes doesn't get on board. Sometimes it's the things that we all know. They may not understand. It may not be their mindset. Sometimes it's family sees you chasing that Roadrunner, and they're concerned that at some point when you're not able to catch that Roadrunner, you're going to be coming to them at the last minute because now they're about to put you out the house. Now you can't eat. Now, it's all these different things, right? And now, I'm going to get put on the spot. The day that their folks are coming to put you out, that's when I get the call because it didn't work,
Yeah.
right? And that's what sometimes I think family underlying looks at when they look at those that pursue entrepreneurship and business ownership. And so it's interesting, but I've used that analogy, a good bit, and I thought about it, and it's like that's what I was, right? I was the coyote chasing the roadrunner and not pursuing what is my mission, what do I see, how do I view myself, right? Now, you've seen that, many listening to this have seen that. You know what's the overarching thing that I want to achieve? And so when I do this webinar, it's to help people unite
Yeah.
through real estate. Right? How
Yeah.
does real estate do that? Right?
Yeah.
Well, it allows a medium to help people who sell real estate and people who buy real estate unite. Right? And
So,
when you could be one of those people, you could be a seller, you could be a buyer, or you can help sellers and buyers do that. And so that creates synergy, that creates opportunities to then make money. Right? And so teaching people that mindset, but I guarantee you, people are going to come in my webinar thinking they want me to show pictures of checks and pictures of wires and screenshots of online banking and all that, because they want to get riled up into, oh, let me show where I made 20 grand, or let me show where I made, oh, I love to have 20 grand. Right? So they get hyped. They want the hype and that sizzle from the steak. It's kind of like when the waiter or waitress is bringing a steak, you hear it sizzle from 20 feet away before you even see it. And you're like, oh boy. Right, Steve? Here
yeah.
we go. Not sure if you're a steak eater or not, but
I am. I'm a Texas boy.
yeah, I was going to say, you like beef,
Yeah.
for sure. So, but anyway, I appreciate you sharing that, because that's, kind of comes to my mind is that analogy. Steve, let's talk about the book.
Yeah.
All right. So off the top, I talked about the golden toilet. Okay. And MYB, you can find it. The link's in the show notes. Go ahead and place your order. He's got it available in Kindle, the audiobook, and paperback. I'm going to order the paperback myself, but you order one or more as you see fit. But talk about the book, the inspiration behind it, Steve, and what we can expect.
Yeah. Champron, I had these conversations. We talked a bit about it, where they'd come in and they'd say this theme of expectation of what they needed from me. And I realized after hundreds of these conversations, I needed to write a book about it so that I could help people instead of just the one person that I was talking to that day.
Yes. Makes sense.
Excuse me.
No, you're good.
But the reason I called it the golden toilet is because you can get focused on the wrong things and waste a lot of money. It's this universal, iconic image of wasted money that just, you can't help but smile when you say the golden toilet. But it's a way to stop the brain and reframe the way that we're looking at this challenge. And so I would have all these very smart business people come in and go, Steve, I need to redo my website. And finally, that you need to tell someone something 7 times before they finally hear it.
Yeah.
Well, in a sales call, it's hard to say it 7 times before they finally hear it. And so the way to stop it and get them to reframe was, I started to say, look, your website is just a toilet. And their brain, you could hear the tires skidding on the pavement. Their little.
I thought you were gonna say you could hear the flushing in their brain.
Yeah. And it was like, and they go, what? My website's a toilet. And now I had their attention. Is like, yes, you wouldn't work in an office if it didn't have a toilet. You wouldn't build a house if it didn't have a restroom. But when people come over to your house, where do you hang out? The kitchen, the fire,
the living room, dining room, whatever,
whatever.
The porch.
Okay. And so it's the same thing here. It's like, it's an important piece of an overall system, a bigger system. And I want you to look at it right. And that's what this book about. But there's 4 things that have to be in place for you to really excel and make your transition from the old traditional marketing into the modern world of marketing. You have to get your messaging clear. You have to take advantage of the technology of the day. And there's those, your marketing automation and your sales automation. Then when you have those ready, now you can start running strategic campaigns. Those four things is how you look at it. Everyone knows they need a website and then they're posting social media ads or something, but what they don't have is what's underneath the tip of the iceberg. And it's the system that helps you identify and follow up on people and bring them in closer to develop a relationship.
Right.
And so that book is just a beautiful way for the folks that are listening. It's written specifically for your audience and how to have the right words and the right expectations and help you successfully navigate this challenge every one of them has to face. And so it helps you talk walk the talk and understand what you need to expect of the folks that you want to hire to help you do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Steve. And like I say again, I encourage everybody in the show notes, you'll see the link to be able to go ahead and purchase your book, your copy of The Golden Toilet, and let it be a resource for you. It's like I spoke about earlier, having those notches in your belt, those tools in your tool belt, to help you be just that much better and much better prepared as you go out there. And so talk about the podcast as well, Steve, and you're up to, roughly around 70 episodes there with ROI Online, the podcast. Talk about that and what can we all expect from you guys on the podcast?
Yeah. So, when this pandemic hit, a lot of things froze up. And as an entrepreneur, I had to back up and go, well, I can sit and pout about this, or what can I focus on? What is it that I can control? And in the back of my mind, I knew I needed to start my podcast. And I thought, well, let's just start it now. And so the reasoning behind that podcast, I had this experience where I got a scholarship from Goldman Sachs to attend a 10,000 small businesses program that they sponsored. And so I get to do this, and I'm sitting in a room with 40 other entrepreneurs. And it hit me. We were having lunch and kind of talking at a break, and I realized that these folks understood me. Your spouse, your employees, they don't know all the things that you're experiencing and struggling with. They want to, but they can't relate. Okay. But here I was sitting with all these entrepreneurs from these different stages of their business and realized I'm not crazy. Okay. And they experienced it too. They felt the same way too. And that's what my podcast is about, is we're having conversations that your listeners or my listeners, when they listen in, they get to have this, oh, I'm not crazy. And learn a little something for me to deal with the same thing that the conversation's about, just like the same intent that you have with this show.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and of course, the podcast can be found on any of the podcast platforms. That's correct, Steve.
Yes.
And of course, obviously on your website as well, which again is in the show notes. MYB is that you can connect with the podcast, which is simply when you go to roionline.com, just do /podcast. And, I like to send everybody to the website first. And so go there to connect with Steve and his team and listen to the podcast episodes, I should say. And when you connect there, reach out to Steve and his team and let him know that you heard him right here on the Minding Your Business podcast, and interact and engage with him there. Steve, this has been probably one of the more transparent, engaging kind of dialogues that I've had with the guest on this podcast, just in terms of the realness and the authenticity that you and I just spoke to. So I definitely thank you for that. How can the audience connect with you and your team? And, I just mentioned the website, and, how can they, maybe on social media and that sort of thing, kind of follow along with what you guys are doing and engage there?
Hey, so I'm on LinkedIn. Obviously, there's a lot of Steve Brown. So it's Steve Brown -ROI Online. on LinkedIn. You
Sure.
can reach out to me there, message me or whatever, and I'll help you find the resources that you're looking for. Obviously the ROI Online podcast and roionline.com is a great way to connect. If you want to schedule a little time with me and just get a little idea of maybe what you might consider, I'm happy to connect with folks and offer you 45 minutes of my time just to kind of give you a little consulting there. That's
Sure.
my website. And also, Champron, the 10 people that email you,
Okay.
okay, you send them my way. I'll send them a free Kindle copy of my book.
All right. Awesome.
Okay, we'll
I
send them.
dig that.
Yeah, and all I ask is that after they read it, just go write an honest a review of my book on Amazon. It's got great reviews, but I would love to offer that to your
Yeah.
audience.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's take Steve up on that, MYB. So you can email me, Ron at themybpodcast.com.
Mm-hmm.
Ron at THEMYB, Mary Yellow Brown, podcast.com. Ron at themybpodcast.com. Email me for the 10 folks, as Steve mentioned, that email me and say, hey, I want a copy of Steve's book. I want to go sit on the golden toilet. Matter of fact, make that your subject line. Sit on the golden toilet. Yeah, put that in your subject line. We'll have a little fun with this, and then I will get those over to Steve expeditiously and get you a copy of the audiobook, The Golden Toilet, and that would be at no cost to you. So I encourage you all to do that. Again, that's an opportunity for a no-cost resource, which is always tremendous in any environment, particularly in today. So, Steve, thank you for that great offer for this community. And Steve, thank you for being, a guest, taking time out to be here on this particular episode. We got a chance to learn a lot about you, learn a lot about your company, your organization, and as importantly, the resources that you provide and the resource that you can be for all of us. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it.
Champron, you're an awesome guest. This has been, I hate that we're wrapping up. This has been
yeah. Well, what we'll have to do is, man, we're going to have to come back. And this is something that I really want to do. And I need to do a better job of with my guest is kind of circling back over time. And because as things evolve and things change, right? I've got some guests that I had on, 3 years ago that obviously a whole lot's changed in their lives and in the environment that we want to come back and have subsequent conversations, man. And so, Steve, I want to do that with you as we get into 2021 and things continue to evolve and the environment evolves and you and I evolve, that we can have, kind of ongoing dialogues and again, really be resources to other people as you and I. That's kind of our overarching kind of goal in this. And so let's do that, man. This has been tremendous and I want to have you back, man, for sure.
Thanks, Champron. You're an awesome host.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That was Steve Brown, founder of ROI Online, the author of The Golden Toilet. Stop flushing your marketing budget into your website and build a system that grows your business, as well as the host of the ROI Online podcast. And so those links are in the show notes. When you get done listening, go ahead and reach out and connect there. Don't forget, email me, Ron at themybpodcast.com. For the first 10 folks, you'll get the audio book at no cost to you. That's tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So make sure that you do that.
The Kindle version.
The Kindle version. Yep. So you got to make sure you have your Kindle. So that's pretty simple. You probably have the app on your phone. And I'm sure all of you are using Amazon and all that type of thing. So you'll be able to get that actually very expeditiously and be able to jump right in on the audiobook. And that's great, just like your podcast, to be able to connect and listen even on the go. And so that's a tremendous way to do that. So thanks to our guest today, Steve Brown. Thanks to all of you for taking time out. I really appreciate that. Wherever you are, whether you're watching this on YouTube, you're on social media, Facebook, Instagram. Now we've got Clubhouse to add to our our Merry Brew here. Or if you're listening on one of the podcast DSPs, Thank you so much for your support. Make sure you go to champronbrooks.com. That's where you can connect with me, listen to episodes of the podcast there, and learn about all my different ventures and escapades. And of course, I'm at champ_Ron_ on all the various social medias. I said it earlier, but I want to reiterate that this point, because Steve and I talked profusely about it in our discussion. 3 things that unite us all, no matter where we're from, whether you're from rural Texas like Steve, whether you're from the big city, whether you're from the other side of the world or the planet, or maybe you're from a different planet. I don't know. But wherever you're from, there are 3 things that unite us. We all want to be a little bit better for ourselves, a little bit better for our families, and a little bit better for our communities. And if we keep that in mind with everybody that we interact with, we'll all collectively make this place just a little bit better. Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast. Go be great.